Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Method in Madness. This is episode number 54. Today, we're going to talk about our bodies, our physical bodies. But before that, I would like to say that we are sorry that we weren't there last week due to some medical emergency. We had to call off the show. But I assure you, everything is all right. And we are back again with our episodes. So, today, we're going to talk about our bodies. The lockdown has affected us immensely, not just mentally, but physically as well. Teachers, parents, students, all of us are stuck in front of this camera and on our chairs. So we thought that it is important that we bring our attention to a technique which has the potential to keep you active when you're resting. The Alexander Technique. To talk about Alexander Technique and physical health leading to mental health, we have with us Padmini Menon. I met Padmini because I was looking for an Alexander teacher after coming back from London. I had done a course there, and they taught us Alexander Technique over there. So I was desperately looking for a teacher who could teach Alexander Technique in India. And I found out that Padmini was the only teacher in India who would teach that technique. Thankfully, she was visiting Delhi, and I was fortunate to do a short course with her. But today, she's going to be here with us talking about how the technique works. She right now trains at various cities, right now online, but she is the only teacher, Alexander Technique teacher in India, and we are proud to have her with us on the show. Thank you, Padmini, for joining us.
Thank you, Vaishali. Nice to be here and chat with you again.
Thank you. Padmini, just to let all our audience know that Padmini and I, we are going to talk for the next 45 minutes, and then we are going to take your questions. So before we begin, let me just see if is there something I can hear myself echoing. Can you hear an echo? No. Okay. Anyway.
I can't.
All right. Great. So all right. So before we begin, let us just talk about a little bit about how the lockdown has has gone, and how has it been, and how has it affected our health physically. So I would ask all of you to kind of send your comments on the chat box, and maybe we can start with how has it affected you as a person, Padmini, and what do you think the effect has been overall?
Vaishali, first of all, it's a little inaccurate to say just physical health, because I'm sure you know with your drama work and body work and so on, you can't really separate the two. So we could talk about focusing a little more on the body or focusing a little more on the mind, but we always have to remember that what happens in the body influences the mind and vice versa. And even that is taking the connection one step apart, because the mind and the body really are one. So if you're thinking about the effects of the lockdown, so we're looking at what we think are the physical effects, which is that you're confined to your house. A lot of people cannot step out. And sometimes the space in the house is less. So that brings in a physical effect, in the sense that you have much less physical activity, much less movement happening, and that can affect you mentally, because it makes you restless, irritable. All of that happens. But we can also look at the mental side of it, which is that in a sense you are cut off from your circle of friends and family, even though the online option is there, and
Right.
many of us exercise it, but it's no substitute for actual physical contact and reaction. And so you have the effect of the of that being cut away from us, but then also you have the fact that many of us are also dealing with loss and grief in a way that we have not dealt with before, because in normal life, as it were, we have structures which are built to help us deal with grief, to get a certain amount of closure when someone dies. And all of those structures have been stripped away for a large number of us. So people are going through the mental anguish of losing loved ones and not being able to get that closure because they can't see them in the hospital, they can't go to the funeral. And that's obviously a very strong mental effect. But
Right.
that will have its effect on us. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It
Yeah.
has been. I mean, I'm sure many of us are going through this kind of a trauma, where every week we get a news where of somebody known, hospitalized or passing away.
And on top of all of, sorry, yeah, on top of all of that, we still have to keep our daily routine going, because what is the alternative? This is like there seems to be no definite end in sight.
Mm,
So you've got to keep your daily routine going given all these different circumstances. So, dealing with completely new circumstances with all of these stresses, so it's a mental and a physical stress. So, you have the physical effects, what you can think of as the physical effects,
mm,
and what you can think of as the mental effects, but they are constantly flowing into each other and making, making it that much more difficult for us to deal with. Yeah.
right. So, I mean, throughout the lockdown, there have been many uh, on many social media platforms. There have been people who have raised this question of what are we doing for our mental health, and there have been many people who have started some kind of a physical practice as well. Some of them are doing yoga, some are doing martial arts. Um, so, amongst all these all these techniques that usually people are going to for physical well-being, where do you see the optimum use of body and exercises and ways that people work with their bodies? Where does a person find that balance of doing yoga and then doing some workout and joining a Zumba class, for instance? Do multiple things like this really help, or do we need to follow something which is in a process?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because it also depends on where you are, what your circumstances are. So if you're you're a full family of parents and children, it may not be possible for the parents to do these multiple things, and so you've
Hmm.
got to squeeze in time for one thing and hopefully do that well. But then you have to deal with your children running the house, whereas someone who's, say, retired and children have left, they have a different kind of problem. So they may have time to do all of these things, but then they miss all the other social interactions, going out, all of that, they miss that. So it's, I think it helps at one level because you do yoga, you do meditation, you do Zumba, at least your body moves or your mind is helped to be quietened a bit. So to that extent, definitely, I think these are things that we should look at in order to help us deal with the way life is right now. Otherwise, I think many of us would just have gone mad.
Mm,
It can be used to give structure to your day, plus it can help you work with yourself mentally and physically in order to make life bearable. And what exactly you choose will depend upon your circumstances, your physical makeup, your liking, uh, you know, something
mm.
like that. So
Like,
someone who is very young will maybe sign up for Zumba classes. Someone who's a little older might find yoga and meditation is more helpful. So we've got to choose our own, but I think they definitely have a place. Yeah.
Right. Many of our audience today are teachers, and teachers have been really, hit bad with the COVID, because they have to be up, not just working with the children online, but also preparing their PPTs and whatnot on the table. So they are constantly, on the chair, and the posture, and not just the posture, everything that relates to the posture kind of has taken a back seat, which is affecting mental health as well. I mean, they're getting irritated quite soon. There is anxiety, and none of their fault, because the situation is such. So, can we look at Alexander technique as something that can come as a help for teachers, or people or parents who are spending more than 5 to 6 hours on the chair every day?
Absolutely, it can, because one of the things that I like very much about the Alexander technique is that one, it's really simple, and two, you don't need to set aside like an hour or half an hour to do the Alexander technique, because the things that you learn are meant to be applied during your day when you're doing other stuff. Now, I'm not saying that's easy, because we already have a set way of doing things. So, if we're working in front of the computer, we sit down, we have a way we sit and a way we work, and it's very difficult to get away from it. But it's possible. So, the Alexander technique gives you skills which you use during your day. So, to that extent, you don't have to put aside time and a place to do the Alexander technique. And it focuses on helping you become aware of tensions that you're holding in yourself, and how to let go of those tensions in action. Meaning, you're not just sitting and paying attention just to yourself, quietly letting go of tensions. You're sitting in front of the computer, or you're doing your cooking, or you're dealing with your children, but you have the skills which you can use to keep yourself physically and mentally not so frazzled.
Right.
So it can definitely help. Yes.
It has helped me. I can tell you for sure that the techniques
Mm.
that I learned from you, it has definitely helped me keep up with my work throughout. And touch wood, I did not have any issue with my back, because I always kept the technique on mind. So let's just ask you the simplest question: what is Alexander technique, and how can we practice that in the simplest form?
Okay. So what the Alexander technique is, I can, go on for hours about it, go into great detail, but that's not going to make sense. So, to put it very simply, it's just, if you think back to the time we were children and moved much more freely and joyfully and with abandon, as we grew up, we built up habits of work, of movement, of a way of sitting, ways of standing, ways of moving. And these were built up a lot of the time by observing people around us, our the adults, our parents, friends, parents, things like that, who are not usually ideal models. So what we the kind of muscle use pattern that we have built up for ourselves, most of us, is based on tightening and constriction and tension. And this is the pattern we take into everything, that it's like a template that we use, whether you're sitting quietly and reading, you're having a cup of tea, or you're playing tennis or badminton, or you're singing. This is what goes into everything. And if it's based on tension and tightening, it's not good for us. And if we're doing something that's as challenging as working in front of a computer for hours, or doing any of the performance skills, it really has the potential, this kind of tension based muscular pattern really has the potential to damage us quite badly, which you can see because there's no shortage of people getting back pain, shoulder pain, because of computer work. You have burnouts for performers, so it's not unusual. If you're able to become aware of what's happening in you and you're able to let go of that, then your muscles can do their work without this extra tension kind of interfering. So
Hmm.
there seems to be less effort. You feel that you're not putting in that much effort as you used to. But there's also this ease in action. Whatever seems to be, whatever you're doing seems to flow better, and you spend less effort. You feel less spent at the time after you finished it. So, all in all, it's a way of living without constantly putting this burden of extra effort, physical effort on ourselves. But it's not separate. Physical and mental are not separate. So when you're able to do this, it also calms you down mentally. So if there's a crisis or if there's a difficult situation, you deal with it much more differently than you would if you're all tight and punched up.
I have noticed that when I keep that in mind, the technique in mind, it is extremely meditative. I feel for that moment or for that length of our time that I am aware. I feel very meditative. I slow down, but the efficiency is not, it's not compromised.
Yes.
I'm as efficient and maybe more efficient than what I would be otherwise. Also remember, Padmini, when we were doing this session at a drama school, the first thing that the teacher came and said is, "Okay, sit on your sitting bones," and that kind of shifted the entire way we sit, and we have been sitting through our lives. So can you please tell us a little bit more about what are these little shifts in awareness that we could right now pay attention to and
Sure.
experience it? Yeah.
So since you brought up the sitting bones, we can start with that, and then if you want one more tiny example, I can do that as well. So what you've said is really interesting because they're really small shifts, and they seem to make such a huge difference. So the sit bones are the bones on which they are rounded bones, and they are the bones on which you balance if you are sitting upright. If you're sitting slumped, you're not on the sit bones, you've actually gone behind them. You're most probably on your tailbone, which is not a nice way to sit. But if you're sitting upright, then you are bang on top of the sit bones. It's like a rocking chair. It's like you're sitting in a rocking chair because they're rounded, and so you can easily move forward and back on them. You can think of this awareness of the sitting bones as something that you can use to orient yourself in your chair to come to a position in which release is easier. It's easier for your muscles to let go of tension because you're in a position where they can work better. But the thing is that just sitting on the sit bones, it's a good beginning. It really helps, but it's not the only thing. Because you can sit on your sit bones and be absolutely as tight as a drum.
Hmm.
So along with that, this is a part of what we do, awareness of ourselves and how we move and so on. But along with that, there is this very specific and skillful use of thinking to allow muscles to let go of tension. So, if I'm sitting on my sit bones, I can also gently think or ask for my muscles, the muscles of my back, to let go of tension to allow me to gently lengthen up. I'm not doing this, I'm not pulling myself up. And the fact is, if you try pulling yourself up, you pull yourself off your sit bones. So it doesn't really help. All I'm doing is just a gentle thought that I'd like the muscles of my back to let go of tension. And that combined with the position makes it much more effective. So it helps you to sit the way you're designed to sit, but also to sit with just the right amount of effort.
Mm.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
We can ask our audience to try this out. Try
yeah,
sitting on your
sure.
sit bones
Yes,
and see
absolutely.
if you, yeah, and if it makes a shift or not. You're on mute. Just hold on. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
The only thing is, it works best if you're sitting on a fairly firm chair. If you're sitting on a very soft cushion, it's difficult to get a sense of them. If you're sitting on a hard or firm chair, you can absolutely feel the contact of those bones on the chair. It's much easier. That's the only thing.
Also on the floor, maybe some of us can try on the floor, sitting on the floor.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're sitting cross-legged, it is useful to be aware of those sit bones and make sure that you're on the sit bones. Yeah. So it's a very simple thing. It's just this tiny little awareness, but it can completely alter the way you sit.
So, who was Alexander and why is it called Alexander technique?
Alexander technique is called Alexander technique because Alexander made it, but not Alexander the Great, which is a mistake which a lot of people make. No, this was an actor called F.M. Alexander. He was an Australian actor who who built his career on what was called dramatic recitation, which is just the one person on stage reading out the play or poem or whatever it was. And he was doing very well at it, except that he began to lose his voice during performance to the extent that I think a couple of times he even had to stop because it got really bad. But when he went to the doctors and consulted them, they said there's nothing wrong with your vocal organs. Maybe you should just rest your voice before you start. And I think they thought he would be fine. And he did that, but he wasn't fine because he got the same problem the next time he performed. So, being a kind of a stubborn, obstinate kind of person, he thought about it and came to the conclusion that if at other times his voice was fine and it was breaking down when he was on stage, obviously he was doing something on stage that was causing his voice to give out. So he said to have set up mirrors so that you can look at all angles of yourself and recite it, looking to see what he was doing that was causing the problem. And I think initially he couldn't spot anything much, but he persevered. And then he realized that when he was beginning to speak, he went into a very subtle but definite pattern of tightening his neck, so his head would pull back and everything would be tight. And I think that was the first aspect that he discovered. And he could not go into performance without doing this. So then he had to think and figure out what the way is to get into performance without going through this initial ritual of tightening. And that's how he figured out that is really the basis of the Alexander technique, that we all have this pre set pattern of tightening which we use to do whatever it is we do. And of course, for him, it was exaggerated because he was in this challenging situation of a performance. So the pattern was a little stronger. And then he had to figure out, okay, how do I do this without going through this pattern of tightening and pulling my neck down? And he discovered he was also tightening his shoulders, his feet. So it was a total pattern. And then from the way that he worked it out, he figured it out, and his performances not only did they improve, but he started obviously getting people asking him, what did you do, teach me too. So eventually that was how he shifted to teaching people how to do it. So yeah, so that's how it works.
All right. Um, Now, let's talk about how this technique not just helps performers, but also people with chronic ailments. There are many teachers and parents who are here who themselves might have back issues because they are having back issues. All of us are having back issues. But also maybe some people at home who have chronic back problems. What are the different problems related to the spine that Alexander technique can really, help with?
Yeah. So the first thing that we should be really clear about is that it's not a medical technique. So back pain can be a symptom in a wide range of problems, and some of them are medical problems. I think, for instance, if you have uh, you have a problem with your kidney, you one of the symptoms can be back pain. So there are similar things where the condition is medical and back pain is just a symptom of that. Then you can't help. The Alexander technique doesn't work because you need treatment for that. Where it helps with back pain is when the back pain has been caused by tension and tightening, a particular way of sitting for long hours, putting a lot of stress on the shoulders, the back, and so on. And significantly, that's a problem where doctors can't help, because what can they do? You're doing it to yourself. So that's the place where the Alexander technique can help. It can help by teaching you, for instance, if you have a back pain, by teaching you to start becoming aware of what, for instance, sitting on the sit bones. If you're sitting slumped and you're working at the computer like this for 8 hours a day, you're putting a lot of stress on your back, your shoulders, your neck, your head. And when you become aware of it, and for instance, you can come up onto your sit bones and sit better, then you're putting much less stress on yourself. So then the back pain can go away. Then it can heal. So it's a different thing. It's more like learning the Alexander technique is like learning a skill. It is learning a skill. The skill of being able to being aware of what's happening in yourself and how you can make the best possible things happen for whatever you want to do, so to speak. Yeah. And one more thing is that even when you're undergoing medical treatment, the Alexander technique can help in the healing. So for instance, if you've had surgery, for instance, the Alexander technique can help because it calms you down. And so healing helps faster. So it's a really good supplement to the medical treatment that you're getting. But of course, it cannot be the treatment itself.
Right. In the technique, I've often heard you and also other teachers use this word ask. So I had a very old physical performance teacher. I'll name her. Her name is Katia Benjamin, and she teaches at the RADA. So she, before we were, wrapping up the course, she said that, if you don't understand anything what to do with your body, or where to put your head, or what to do with your hands, just ask your body. So the word ask, um, could you just share something which could be from your own experience uh, around the word ask, and why is that word so important in the technique? You're mute again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along with the word ask, there's also another word which is equally important, and that's allow.
Allow.
Yep. So why it's ask is because we normally, and I think this is a part of our training, we normally tend to be driven and everything that we want has to happen now. Everything that we intend to do has to be done now, and it has to be done in the best way possible. And then you have this obsession with correct answers. You have to get the correct answer, you have to get it now. So when we intend to do something, we have all of these things pushing in our minds, and we tend to do it with much more effort than is necessary. So even if it's a simple thing like, just if I say, just sit quietly and ask your neck muscles to just relax, to soften a bit, even that becomes a huge problem of achievement and getting it correct, and getting a response, knowing that you have done it correctly.
Right. Mm.
But you may not, because it's a subtle shift, so you may not pick it up. And then if you don't pick it up, you start pushing even more. Maybe you start rolling your head around, you start wriggling your shoulders, you want to do something to make that neck muscle free up, but you can't. The more you try, the less you get. And that's why you ask. You don't command, you don't order, though I think orders is a term that's used, but now more commonly it is ask, because ask has this connotation of gentleness, of a little bit of quietness. So the thing is, you don't push. Even in your thinking, you don't push. And after you have asked, you allow the response to happen. So you don't try, you don't push. Whatever wants to happen can happen. So it might be that you get a sense that there has been some relaxation in your neck muscles. Good. You might get a sense that nothing has happened with your neck muscles, no change. Good. You might get a sense that your neck muscles are tightened. Good. Because the focus is not on what's happening with your neck, it's how are you thinking about it, because ultimately it's the thinking that starts the change. So your thinking is gentle and quiet, and you allow whatever happens to happen. You don't really worry about it. So I always try when I'm teaching never to say free your neck, because that's like a direct thing, do it. And immediately it's like, oh, what do I have to do? I need to get my neck free. So whereas if you can say ask and allow, it's some kind of, okay, you don't have to do anything. You just have to sit quietly and let the response happen, whether you notice it or not. So it is really important what words you use, because they have such a subconscious effect, and the person may not even be aware that they are responding differently, but they are usually.
Yes. Can we try a few sentences with our audiences over here? Maybe I can also listen and maybe try and listen.
Okay. So let's start with the sitting bones, since you know that you brought that up, and it's a really simple awareness that you can start with. So the first thing that you can think about is the contact that you're making with your chair as you sit in it. And if you're sitting upright, if you think you're not sitting upright, just bring yourself into upright for the purposes for these few minutes, and pay attention to the contact that you're making with your chair. And you should notice that there are these two rounded bones which on which you're balanced. And in fact, you can even just rock gently forward and back, and you'll find the bones roll as you sit and rock. So that's your base for sitting for now. Okay. And the good thing about having the sit bones the way they are is that they're not flat, they're rounded. So even in your sitting, there is some mobility built in. It's like, for instance, you're sitting on an exercise ball. There's no point when you're absolutely still. There's always a little bit of movement going around, happening. Because the ball is moving, your body is responding to keep you balanced on it. So there's always a slight amount of movement going on. And it's something of that kind with the sit bones. So that's your base. And then just gently bring your awareness to your back. So your back starts from your sit bones and just comes up. So ask your back, especially your lower back, because I think most of us tend to tighten our lower back in order to support ourselves in the chair. That's the way we hold ourselves in the chair and keep from falling down. But that's not necessary. So take a few moments to just think of the lower back softening, letting go of tension, so the whole back can relax and just lengthen up from the chair. As if you're growing taller. You're not pushing yourself up. You're not trying to force anything. You're quietly sitting and thinking of your back gently releasing and lengthening up from your sit bones. One more thing, bring your awareness gently to your shoulders and remind your shoulders gently. It's not their job to support you in your sitting. That's the other thing we tend to do, which is we tense our shoulders to hold ourselves in the chair. It's not their job. The back, the torso can do a perfectly good job of supporting you easily and comfortably in your sitting. So just again, you can't do this. You have no option but to ask and allow. So ask your shoulders to let go of tension, not hold on, and just leave them alone. You might notice a response or you might not, but either is fine, no problem at all. And then remind your neck muscles to let go, to soften a bit. So it's not like your head and your spine are locked together into one inflexible unit. There is some articulation possible between your head and your spine when your neck muscles free up. And we want that because we want the head balanced on top of the spine, not locked onto the spine. And when the neck muscles free up, the head can be balanced on the spine.
I can also feel my jaw dropping and
Yes,
freeing up.
yes, yes, yes. So it depends. Different people will feel different things. So some people feel a response in the shoulder, some in the lower back, some in the neck perhaps. So it all depends on what our particular pattern of holding is. But yeah, so this is the way you use your mind, and it's a very specific skill of using thinking in this particular way to encourage release to happen in the muscles. And this same process can be taken into anything you like. This is really the essence of the Alexander technique. If you can work at it quietly and patiently and regularly, you don't need Alexander technique lessons because this is what it is. Really.
Thank you, Padmini. Thank you for
That's
doing this.
not at
I
all.
hope everybody who's listening and watching us, you also try it and see whether it makes any difference and if there is a shift. Uh, Padmini, it seems that words like ask, allow,
Hmm.
let
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
In itself, these words are very meditative in nature, and it
Hmm.
kind of paves the way of the way you live.
Yeah.
Uh, so, such an amazing technique. Why do we have just one teacher in India?
Oh, yeah. I think, well, actually, very soon there may be more than one teacher because there are some students training with another pair of teachers who are from Switzerland. So they used to come personally and train them, but COVID has put everything upside down. They are working online, and at some point, I think they're going to come and finish the training. So at some point, we will have more teachers. But uh, basically, the problem is that it's a 3 year full time training. It's expensive, and so I mean, I decided I wanted to do it because I'd read about it and it just made so much sense.
Hmm.
um, so I just wanted to do it. But not everyone is like that. I mean, everyone has their own lives, their own priorities, their own responsibilities, so it's not easy to get away for 3 years full time.
Right.
And you spend an enormous amount of money. There's no aid available because they're all private schools. It's not like it's a university course where you will get aid, so there's no aid available. You've got to do it on your own. And I think with the money that I spent, those 3 years, and on the fees, I could have bought a small flat somewhere. And in fact, I think somebody told me, everyone thought I was mad, and someone did tell me, I think someone did tell me that, with the money that you're spending on this, and what is this, Alexander, taking? What are you talking about? Why are you doing this? You can buy a flat and you'll get a nice income. Do you really want to go abroad and just blow up this money? But I can understand where they're coming from because it seems so vague. And I didn't have the words to talk about it. I just could say something very vaguely. It's tension release and it's posture. So they said, why don't you do meditation or yoga? What is this
Hmm.
thing that you need to go to UK to do? So at that time there was just not enough awareness about what it can do and how really it can help. So nobody chose it, and I can understand why.
Hmm. I saw a saddle just now before we started the show.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
so, are there equipments that you use to help clients
Well,
who come to you?
one of the things that I like everything about it, but one of the things that I really like is that it's low tech. So if necessary, you can just walk into a room with people and give them an Alexander lesson, even if there are no chairs. But yes, we do use minimal equipment. One is we use a chair, and I have a table where I work with people lying down, but it's not essential. I can work with them lying on the ground. But the saddle that you saw is a kind of specialized work. Well, not specialized, but I work with people sitting on the horse. That's what you see in the background there. It's really good for the hips and to encourage release in the hips and the torso. But I don't do it until they've had a few lessons. And it's not an essential. Not everyone has a horse and saddle. So it's not essential. So basically, a chair, a table, I mean, that's about it. And a room, I guess, a space. Yeah, that's about it. You're set. And you can even manage without those if you have to. So, yeah.
Right. No, thank you very much for telling us about how this works and how easy it is actually to work with
Yeah.
Alexander Technique. Uh, how are you reaching out to people now during the COVID situation, the lockdown
Mm.
situation? Is it possible to get this kind of a technique, train,
Mm.
or maybe consult you sitting somewhere else? Is it possible online?
Yeah, I started out with the belief that it's not possible. So when I started practicing, there was this very strong feeling in the majority of the Alexander world that you had to have your hands on in
Hmm.
order to teach someone effectively. Um, However, I found that people were reaching out to me from, say, Jabalpur and saying, I want to learn this. And there was no way I was going to
Right.
go to Jabalpur to teach them. I couldn't. So
Hmm.
even then, I had started experimenting with Skype, and I'd found that it seems to be possible. It seemed like I could talk to someone and talk them through a lesson, and they did get benefit from it. And
Hmm.
now, of course, it's all online. So then, what you have to do is to one, try and arrange the environment so that excuse me, so that I can see you as clearly as possible.
Hmm.
And then I just need to look at you and see what you're doing and give you guidance on how you're moving and suggest ways in which you can improve that. So, yeah, and now a lot of people are discovering that, yeah, online lessons seem to be possible. There's no other option.
Yes, there is no other option. But yes,
Yeah.
it is a great option if we can do this sitting, right in front of our computers and understanding how, live understanding how we can place ourselves on the chair and still be relaxed at the same time and work. If I mean, I'm sure many of our audience members over here would be interested in getting in touch with you to know more, probably. So, is there a Gmail or any contact that we can share with them? Your Gmail account, that ID,
Do you want
right?
me to put it down in the chat? Yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
You
it's neck
put it
free.
down. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
so it's NEK neck free
Yeah,
FR double
EE.
E, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
at gmail.com.
yeah, yeah. That's it.
Great. So I think, and that is the only email I had of yours, I think.
Yeah, this is the one where I have all my work things. So I just keep it to this one. Makes it easier. So yeah, this is the
Yes.
one.
Great. All right. So time for some questions and comments.
Sure, of course.
Many of us have been commenting who are watching.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, okay. So Rose has been there with us since the beginning. So she is
Okay.
saying, can't say, I'm feeling very different. Will need more
Okay.
practice.
Absolutely. So one of the things that can happen, I mean, we've been talking about, feel lovely, feel light, feel tension free. But we have to also remember that these are tensions which are very familiar to us. And sometimes if you let go of them, it doesn't feel so nice. It feels like, oops, what's happening? So yes, it's absolutely, and we all go through this when we are training, with periods when we feel weird and strange. And I went through a phase when I thought I didn't know how to walk, and everyone on the street was looking at me because I was walking so funnily. So yeah, it's a phase that we all go through. It's an understandable response, and yeah, you just need to continue working at it quietly, and things change.
Girish Nair is saying that it is observed that classical singers sit erect while performing, and most of them say that it gives them control over breath. Is it true?
Gives them what? Sorry.
Control over breath.
Control over breath. Yeah, actually, not all classical singers sit erect. Many do, many don't, and many have dreadful use. Um, just sitting erect need not give you control on breath because it depends on how you're sitting. So if you're sitting with a great deal of tightness, then your breathing is actually compromised and you cannot sing with freedom. You have to use a great deal of effort in order to get your notes and your singing as you want it. But if you're sitting erect in the way that you are designed to sit erect, there's no extra tension. Then you have the freedom, your breathing is full and easy, and you have the freedom to sing without effort. So it really depends on how you're sitting.
Right. I think Rose had another question previously. She said she was asking, how do we know that we are sitting correctly? This is also a question that I also often get, that how do we know that we are doing this properly? We are speaking
Mm,
properly or we are pronouncing
mm,
properly, things like that. So,
mm,
how
mm.
do we know that we are sitting correctly?
Mm, okay, so this is a kind of a complex question. So one thing is that there's no golden standard of correctness. It also, yeah, there are some basic things that we talked about. But you see, for instance, if you have someone who has, say, osteoporosis and their bones are compromised, and so they are hunched, they so there's even if you ask them to balance on their sit bones, there is only a certain way they can do it. They cannot do it in the way that you and I can do it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So rather than focusing on the appearance of sitting correctly, it's more helpful to work with things like, okay, where are my sit bones? Can I gently ask for release in my shoulders, in my neck, in my back? And that frees up some tension so that your muscles then start working better. So you're sitting better than you did when you were sitting with tension. And that is a process, it never ends. You just keep getting better and better and better and better. But you never reach a stage when you can say, yeah, now I've got it, I'm perfect. So, rather, what I meant to say was rather than worrying about am I sitting correctly, it's more effective if you think about the process. How am I sitting and how can I sit better right now? So,
Hmm.
I can check if I'm sitting on my sit bones, and I can see if I can sit with a little less effort. I ask to let go of tension, and that's it. And that's what you keep working with, and the sitting correctly happens because of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's not you're going directly to sitting correctly means I have to sit on my sit bones and my head has to be on my shoulders and my shoulders have to be in line with my hips or whatever, all those external parameters
Hmm.
that may not work. It's more it makes more sense to focus on what's happening inside and how can I help my muscles to support me better.
I hope, Rose, you got your answer, and I think many of us have got the answer too. I have a question to ask
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
What changed within you after the Alexander training that you technique training that you took? Uh, was there a shift in some way, maybe in the lifestyle, or anything that you could just share?
Yeah, there was definitely. So, as I said, everything was not pleasant. I did go through this phase of feeling really strange and at a loss sometimes and really awkward. And I still get it sometimes.
Hmm.
But also, there were changes like I was more aware of what I was doing with myself, um, and what was actually going on in me when I sat or when I did something. I was aware of tightnesses. I started becoming so it's not like I don't hold any tightness now and I'm like all free and expanded. I still tighten my neck, but a lot of the time I can catch it. So that's one change which has happened. Um and I have also found that I can respond with much more calmness when something happens, where in situations I would have just panicked and lost it. I'm able to just stop and just take time and respond, and it's usually a much better response. And that has obviously been really helpful because it changes the way you deal with people, and that often changes the situation.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah, and of course, I have to say that it's a process that's going on. It's not like I've reached any state of expertise or nirvana or something, and I still have to work. I
Hmm.
think the easiest way to understand it is if you were a piano player or a tennis player, your learning never ends. Even if you won the Wimbledon, next morning you get up and go for your practice. Because you won something doesn't mean that you have done it all. It's a process.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. Your learning never ends, but it becomes much more it keeps getting more and more interesting because you discover more and more things that you never knew were happening in yourself. So you just so that learning never stops.
Right. Do you have any last thoughts for parents who are watching us today? Is there a way that children can also practice this technique?
Yeah. One, the thing is, when you present it to children, you do it slightly differently because, for one, they haven't built up all these habits, and most of them don't feel they need it. So it doesn't make sense for them to, for you to tell them, okay, free your neck, do this, ask your shoulders to release. They have other things to, so they're not interested in that way of presenting it. So you've got to think of a different way of putting it to them. But I guess with the kind of stresses that children, well, children always went through those kind of stresses at school, and now it's been compounded by the situation as it is now. So I'm sure it has something to offer them. It's just that you've got to think of a different way of presenting it to them. So teaching children can't be the same way you teach adults. You've got to do it differently. But I'm sure it can be done.
Right. Okay, so Crossroads School, she's saying there's a teacher, I think, from the Crossroads School in
Mm-hmm.
Kottayam.
Uh-huh.
She's saying that I think it's a way of life. So, yes.
Yeah, it's absolutely a way of life because, yes, because it just gets into everything that you do. And yeah, it changes the way you live. Spot on.
Okay, Madhura Mitra is saying very good. I can also teach my kids as well as learn myself.
Good. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm great. I mean, I think we have been able to bring an intrigue into our audience's mind about the technique, which is great. I think this is a success for us. Uh,
Great.
please go research more on this when you're done watching our show. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Padmini, for doing this talk with us because
Yeah,
um,
one more thing. People
yeah.
can go to my website if they want to. It's neckfree.com. It's very simple.
Oh,
The same
okay,
neck free, the same thing that you saw, the same neck free that you saw in my email ID dot
oh,
com.
great.
So
So
there's more information in there. So yeah, that's one way.
oh, Lynn is okay. Lynn is the principal at Crossroads, and she's saying it really works already. It started for me. She really
Oh,
practiced
okay.
it, and we have.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing that.
Yeah,
Uh, okay, Anjali has a question. I think we should take this question from her.
sure.
How similar, I think, or different is this from the guided meditations that we?
Hmm.
How is this
Okay.
different from guided
Hmm.
meditations?
It's very similar because a lot of the time a meditative aspect comes into it, but it's different in that you are using it much more actively. So it's not for just when you're sitting, you don't just sit and think about all these things and all this tension freeing up. It really works only when you then transfer it into whatever you're doing in your life. So it's like taking the same meditative quality into your cooking, or your drinking tea, or you're sitting and reading the newspaper, or working on the computer. That same lack of unnecessary tension and tightness, that same quietness, that has to be transferred into everything that you do. Only then can it really change you.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I'm not saying that it doesn't have any effect, but this is how it's intended to work, that you take these skills and use them in whatever you're doing. And that's the other thing that I like about it, that you can use it in anything. So you don't have to worry if you haven't thought about it for in the morning. Fine, I can just start thinking about it now. So there's, always the opportunity is just the one that's in the next second. So it's supposed to be used in that sense as much as you can. Yeah, does that make sense?
I hope so. It makes sense to me.
Okay, okay, good.
All right. Thank you so much again. I think we have come to an end. Just one more minute to go. We have come to
Sure.
an end of the show. Please do subscribe to our channel, Joy of Drama. We do this. Thank you, Ganapati. Ganapati is a regular audience. We have actually been very lucky to have so many regular
Mm,
members
mm, mm.
who come every week to watch our show,
Yeah.
and we are highly indebted to all of them because this is something which is so niche. I was just talking to Padmini that it is so niche that we really need
Mm,
invested people to come
mm.
in and watch.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's a
absolutely.
request. Yeah, it's a request to all of you who are watching. Please do share the link if you like it with your friends and family because this will go live soon. And do subscribe to our channel because we do this every week. Thank you so much. Thank you, Padmini. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful evening.
Vaishali.